Hi everyone. I hope you're all having a good day and enjoying TechShare Pro. You got a little sight into our lovely banter there. So today we're going to be discussing some of the problems that we encounter in everyday life from different perspectives. And the problems don't really need to be there.
And then tomorrow, we will be continuing with a follow-on session from this, and we'll be discussing some of the solutions and changes that can be made to organizations so that we can improve everyone's experience of this really beautiful and diverse world. So my name is Ashley. I'm an accessibility consultant at AbilityNet. I was diagnosed with ADHD 12 years ago and have been a part of the neurodivergent community for about 20 years. So it's kind of given me a really nice perspective of seeing how things have changed in the last, especially the last decade, in terms of attitudes towards neurodiversity. I spent 10 years designing and building both technology and services for people who are neurodivergent and disabled. And a lot of these have been in business, academic, and kind of neurodivergent environments. Rina.
So I am an accessibility consultant from AbilityNet. I am autistic. I found out I was diagnosed about 5.5 years ago. And over the last about 3 years that I've been working at AbilityNet, I've been doing a lot of talking around kind of neurodiversity, lived experience, particularly my experience in kind of the working in the education environments. So first of all, what is neurodiversity? I mean, simply put, it describes how everyone's brains work differently. In terms of terminology, it tends to include diagnoses like ADHD, autism, dyslexia, and some other kind of less commonly thought about conditions sometimes, such as Tourette's and things like that. Just because you have a diagnosis like this doesn't mean that you can't take part in the world. You maybe just need to think about going about things slightly differently. I particularly like this diagram because it kind of gives a different view on the typical kind of linear scale that a lot of people think conditions like autism work on. It's more like a linear scale for each individual kind of component of difficulty that we face. So you can kind of rate each on a scale, and that gives you more of an idea about where the skills and weaknesses are. So I particularly like this. But one of the ways that we can communicate our differences in thinking and being is using the spoon and fork theories. So do you want to go through a bit about spoon theory, Ashley?
Yeah, so spoon theory is a metaphor that was first used 2003, and it essentially describes how much mental energy that we have. So the concept is that we all have a set number of spoons that we have to use each day, and every activity or every task that we carry out takes spoons, and it will be a different number of spoons for different people. So for me, getting out of bed in the morning probably takes quite a big chunk of my spoons. Brushing my teeth, not so much. Cooking still takes some energy as well. And there are certain activities that we can do to replenish our spoons. And that can also be quite different for people. If I'm doing very spoon-heavy work, like taking public transport, it might mean that I don't have enough energy left at the end of the day to do things that are important for myself, like cooking, like eating. And sometimes even the activities that should replenish, I don't have the energy to set up or do, or even turn the TV on. I don't have a TV, but I think you kind of get the point with that. Actually, it's why a lot of my room is mostly automated. It helps cater for the lone spoon count. Rina, do you want to talk about fork theory?
So fork theory, I like to think of working alongside spoon theory, but takes a kind of different look at things. So it works on the basis of kind of things that stress you out. So each thing that stresses you out, even if it's like a little tiny annoyance, like you cut your fingernails too short or something, it has an impact on your ability to cope with life. The forks can vary in size, so something really small will be, you know, a small fork, and something really difficult to cope with, like having a meltdown in the middle of a train station, will be an absolutely massive fork, and you won't be able to cope with anything else. And it's kind of about managing which stressors you can deal with at a certain time. But I also like to think of it in relation to spoon theory, in that when you're dealing with something that's stressing you out, it takes up energy. You know, you spend energy on trying to cope with that stress. And so the sooner you can remove a fork, the fewer spoons you spend on that fork. So we'll be using these a couple of times throughout kind of the presentation to give you a bit of a reference about what we're talking about.
Cool. Problems. So yeah, now we're going to go into basically some problems that might be quite similar to Rina and I, but because we have these neurodivergent differences on the surface, they might look like similar things, but the causes and also the impact on us can be quite different. So the first topic is location. Rina, can you tell me a little bit about what you mean by location, and also what's the kind of impact on you?
So in this setting, we're talking about kind of where you're working from. So that might be an office, it might be you're working from home, or something like a co-working space. And where you work can have quite a big impact on your ability to work, to be productive. For me, I can't work from an office. The unexpected changes of people coming in and leaving, not knowing who's going to be there, the sensory environment of kind of the lights, the smells, the sounds, all of those sorts of things, they're quite difficult for me to cope with. So I work from home because then I can actually do more work. I'm more productive because I don't have to spend my spoons dealing with getting to work, dealing with all of the stresses at work and all of those sorts of things. So having that opportunity to work from home allows me to work in the first place. But you're not like that, are you, Ashley?
No, I'm quite different. Yeah, the kind of summary I was getting there from you was like dealing with a lot of unexpected stuff, sensory stuff, people, not having control over your environment. For me, working from home like all week, it just burns me out. It's, you know, it's a lot of Zoom calls, a lot of sitting at the screen, it's a lot of listening, and you know, different movements on the screen, and it takes so much spoons because it's the level of attention. If I'm in the office, I can turn around and ask someone a question quite quickly. I don't have to plan a call. And there's also the ability for me to read non-verbal communication, body language, facial expressions, and things like that, which for me take less spoons sometimes than being able to hold a whole conversation in my head. So yeah, the impact for me is, I mean, it's probably I'm enjoying the hybrid mix and also being able to go to the office. I don't think I would work for a job if it was fully remote.
But it sounds like we both find that working in the wrong environment leads to burnout, which would then mean that we are less productive. We're taking time off work because we're too stressed. And other people have to pick that up then, don't they?
Yep. It's kind of hard to track remotely as well. But yeah, exactly. You can be less productive. And
harder to communicate sometimes, I think.
Yeah, burnout from communication, which is interesting because, yeah, we've got different communication needs, and it creates different, burnout by not being able to adjust to those, which goes on to communication.
So obviously we have talked a bit about communication in that last one, but we have very different difficulties when it comes to communication. What are your kind of main challenges on this one?
For me, it is that it takes a lot of executive functioning power to hold a conversation productively. You know, I have to filter a lot of thoughts. I'm quite creative, often have quite a lot of ideas. If I'm not really paying and utilizing that executive functioning, I will go off in many directions, and people, unless they have ADHD, won't really be able to follow my train of thought. And then I have to prioritize a lot of information in my head. And so all of this takes cognitive load and therefore takes quite a lot of spoons. But yours is more nuanced, I think, than that.
Yeah, so I'm quite a literal person, thanks to my autism, which ends up giving you some gems of stories. So this one time I was with some friends, and it's not a work environment, but you get the same kind of message. It works the same in kind of a work environment. And there was a slice of pizza left, and it was pepperoni pizza. I don't like pepperoni. But I said to the other two friends that were in the room, does anyone want the pepperoni? And one of them goes, oh, yes, please. So I pick up the slice of pizza and I scrape the pepperoni off the top of it. And she goes, oh, I thought you meant the slice of pizza. And I'm like, no, if I meant the slice of pizza, I would have said the slice of pizza. I meant the pepperoni, so I said the pepperoni. And I mean, bear in mind, I'd been friends with these guys for like couple of years by that point, so they knew. It just hadn't quite processed literally in her head that this was going to be the result of replying yes. And we still laugh about it now, but you can see how that could create some really big issues in the office and in the work environment, you know, misunderstanding each other.
I'm thinking like I'm quite impulsive, so if you're asking me that question, I've just interpreted it as I get the pizza. Might have my heads over getting the pizza and not know why. But yeah, so the impact, I guess, of the communication differences.
I guess for both of us is a kind of misunderstanding of competency. You know, if I'm taking something literally, someone maybe thinks that I don't really get what we're doing, when actually that's not the problem. The problem is that it was not communicated well enough. Whereas for you, it might be that if you're like
spewing in paragraphs, talking in paragraphs, and not concisely,
they could think you're not competent, right?
Right. Well, actually, it's the fact that I've got so much information in my head. It's kind of blowing my mind.
Blowing my mind. Yeah, that happens a lot.
Mind blown.
But then you also feel a bit like an outsider because people aren't understanding you. They're not following what you're saying, right?
Right. And this is one of the reasons I like in-person communication. It's a bit easier for me to pick up those cues than through a computer, where I have to really listen to it and interpret what does silence mean. But yeah, communication also affects other parts of our life, really, like public transport, which is fortunately the next topic.
I hope you're liking these transitions, guys. We worked so hard on getting these to flow.
So what's the difficulties that you have with public transport?
Again, it's like unexpected changes. It's the sensory environment. I mean, when I'm faced with, you know, a lot of sensory stimuli and a lot of things changing, there was this one time a few years ago, I was in Euston Station at rush hour trying to get a train from London to Birmingham, and my train was cancelled. Then the replacement train, the time changed, and then it changed platform. And by the time I actually got to a platform where a train was waiting, I wasn't actually sure where that train was going. At which point there was some station staff standing next to the train, and I asked them, is this train going to Birmingham? And they were in such a rush that, and you know, the station was in chaos. So they were probably stressed out as well. But I was so stressed out and overwhelmed by the situation that I actually couldn't speak. I actually couldn't get any words out. And I ended up sitting on a bench in the station, just having a complete meltdown, crying and rocking. I was like 22 at the time. It's like the stereotypical kind of, you know, autistic meltdown sort of situation. And ever since then, I'm just like, quite frankly, I don't need this. I can drive. I'm capable of driving. I am going to drive. I do not need this stress in my life. I can't, like, I think I had like 2 days off work after that, and I couldn't cook for like a month. So it has like ongoing impact as well.
It sounds really just that kind of thing of like being stuck at Euston, which is super busy, being unable to talk. It's quite vulnerable. Like it's like a nightmare I probably had a couple of days ago or something. But it is like a living nightmare from what you're describing there.
But yours is quite different though. You don't struggle with that sort of thing, do you?
No, I don't have so many problems with the external world being unpredictable. But that might be because I'm quite unpredictable. And so when you get, it's still this kind of like public transport can be a bit unpredictable. Combining it with an unpredictable person just leads to also chaos. You know, a moment's lap in attention means I could end up on the wrong bus and go to the wrong place. I've been on trains and ended up all on the wrong train, going the wrong direction. And then I didn't realize until I got to the end of the line. And by that point, I was quite far away. And then similarly, I kind of gave up with public transport when I once tried to get to Poland 3 times and ended up in Scotland. At this point, instead of trying to implement strategies, I thought like, I just need to come at this completely different because, you know, when you go to Scotland instead of Poland, like I just got to leave public transport as much as possible. And then this does have this big knock-on effect with work, right? Because if you're late, people might think of disrespecting their time. Sorry.
Yeah, and if you if you're late and you're not at work, obviously your work is not getting done, is it? So then other people have to do that work. You can see a theme coming here, can't you? It's like, if we have all of these stresses, we can't do our work and you guys have to do it instead.
And there's the value proposition for our next talk.
Yeah. But yeah, like you said, attitudes as well can be quite difficult, can't they?
Yeah, for me, it probably is that more than anything. It's like the comments people make. Or there was this one instance at school where I'd missed the bus in the morning. And so I biked to school because it was a private bus that took us and I was quite far away from the school. So I had to bike. And I finally get into the lesson. I think I was like just 5 minutes late, but I was so kind of proud of myself for having bolted to school. And I went into the classroom thinking like, cool, I should just be able to, I was sitting at the front, sit down in the corner, no disruption. And the teacher turned around and said, she was like, you are late again. And now I'm having a conversation with you. And now you're disrupting the entire class. And at this point, I just said, well, no, actually, I'm not disrupting the entire class. You are by having this conversation. Which meant I got sent out for that one. But it was this.
I mean, you're not wrong.
I'm like, that was just a little bit of acceptance. Like, yeah, okay, it's 5 minutes. It's not causing anyone any hassle apart from me. He has to catch up for the 5 minutes. You're making this into a bigger problem than it is. Also, we could have spoken about it after class, you know, like adults. But anyway, I'm not going to vent on this because that's what could happen. But yeah, people's attitudes. That for me is often quite the big one. And I think this also leads on quite well to
clothes.
Attitudes toward clothes.
I mean, apart from the fact that I don't get why people put so much value on what you wear. I mean, so long as you're not naked when you turn up to work, what does it really matter, right? But we have these kind of preconceptions about what people should wear in a certain situation. The difficulty comes when you don't really know how to interpret the somewhat vague language that's used around what to wear. I mean, smart casual. Does anyone even know what smart casual is?
Smart or casual? If you do, put something in the chat, because like
we have no idea. But you know, it's for me personally, I find it so difficult to work out what clothes are appropriate or what clothes aren't. There are a preset collection of clothes in my wardrobe that are assigned for work. They are clothes that are appropriate to wear to work. You can't wear this hoodie that's 6 years old that has holes in it, but you can wear this pair of smart trousers, sort of thing.
And so what's the, in terms of struggling with choosing clothes, what's the kind of impact for you?
I mean, for me personally, the impact is that if I don't have my clothes ready, if I have failed to do my washing for whatever reason, I then have to go and choose clothes. I have to judge based on what is in the washing basket, what clothes are similar enough to be appropriate. But then also, I'm stressed out, so I'm less productive. So I can't do as much work. So other people have to do it. But then you also get that kind of that judgment towards you as a person or towards the organization you're representing about whether you care about your job, whether you care about the company's reputation, whether the company is professional. You know, all of those sort of things can be affected by what people look like when they show up.
Absolutely. And totally relate as well to the whole, like, is this clothes looks good enough, or does it smell too badly, to be like that kind of balance trade-off when you've like forgotten to do your washing, knock-on effect. It's a real thing. And we spent like quite a significant amount of time in the morning trying to rectify that. It's definitely not that we don't care.
Exactly.
So this domino effect thing, I think, goes on to the go through this.
So executive functioning. So we've made a little flow chart for you guys, right? So this kind of gives you a look behind the curtains, if you like. Bit of Wizard of Oz reference there. When you see us super stressed out, having a meltdown or going absolutely nuts, it's not normally the thing that's happened just then. It's normally all of the stuff that's happened in the day, the week, the month, who knows how long it's been building up. But it's not normally to do with the last thing that happens. But I mean, this is called executive functioning. It should probably be called executive dysfunction. But Ashley, do you want to explain a bit about what we mean by executive functioning?
So executive functioning, it's a skill of the prefrontal cortex, and it does a lot of with things like planning, switching between tasks, focus, your ability to regulate your attention, and working memory as well. So those are processes that, you know, they affect every pretty much task and activity that we do, from kind of waking up and going to sleep.
So I'll just kind of describe what's on the screen. I'm not going to read it verbatim, but I might give a bit of extra context as well. So effectively, this flowchart starts at the beginning of the day. You know, you wake up, getting ready for work, and you're ready to face the world. And then you realize as you're getting dressed, you've forgotten to do your laundry for whatever reason. It might be because you didn't have enough spoons last night, or because you just simply forgot. And that goes back to our clothes thing. What is appropriate for work? The clothes that are appropriate, that have been deemed appropriate, are in the wash. I can't wear those, so what else can I wear? I finished getting ready, and there's a bit more traffic than normal. When I have to leave the house, you know, if I have to go onto a client site or whatever, or go for a meeting, I plan my day so carefully. I probably spend more time planning the day than I actually spend working on that day, so that I know when to leave, what to do, where to go, and it accommodates normal traffic conditions. You know, if I do it regularly, I'll have a good idea. Otherwise, I'll use things like, you know, Google Maps will give you an idea of traffic conditions in one place or another. And there's more traffic than normal, so I'm getting a little bit stressed here. I get to work and someone comments that I'm late. Now, it doesn't seem to me like they're telling me off, but I am already stressed. And now I'm worrying that people are quietly judging whether I care about my job, because actually I am a little bit late, but they haven't seen all of the stuff that I've already tried to do today. So I stop for my lunch. I go to my normal shop, but the normal lunch is not available for me, as with my autism, the routine, the expectability is quite key. So I like to have the same lunch every day. If my normal lunch is not available, I then have to choose something else to eat, and I'm like, so that's another unexpected change. It's like stressing me out a bit more. So during my lunch, I put my noise cancelling headphones on. I listen to some music. This is one of the ways that I can regain some of those spoons. You know, it's an attempt to kind of pull back the day from the brink of chaos. But then I get back from lunch. There's a challenging email. I'm overwhelmed. I'm stressed out. I'm gonna do it because I'm at work and I kind of have to. But you know, I'm starting to get stressed, and it's going to be slow. I turn my do not disturb so nobody kind of asks me questions and distracts me from what I'm doing. And then someone's trying to be really nice. They can see I'm busy and they ask me if I want a cup of coffee. It's meant to be helpful. It's meant to be nice, but it just breaks me. And I have a complete meltdown. It's like a glass full of water that's been dripping into all day. And that last drip just makes it overflow. I didn't have a meltdown because someone asked me if I wanted a cup of coffee. I had a meltdown because of the chaos of the day, and the cup of coffee was the last
right.
straw.
And that's the thing that other people see. They just see that explosion.
Yeah.
And they might take it personally as well, and it can affect relationships when it has nothing personal to them. And so, yeah, I can really relate to this. It's slightly different for me, but it is the same thing, that where one thing can happen, it can have a knock-on effect, domino effect for the rest of the day. I think we're at 27 minutes.
Yeah, that's what I have.
Okay.
So
we're in sync.
We have a couple of minutes for questions. I can't see the TechShare Pro thing, so if there are any questions, you're going to have to tell me. Because I've got a cat on the screen.
I'm going to scan through the top voted. Lucy, your question is, do you find that your needs and difficulties have changed over time, particularly your sensory perceptions?
For me, I don't think they've necessarily changed. I just think there's different things that have affected my ability to cope with them. So I always struggled with crowds and loud noises, but when I was at school and I didn't have to clean my house and do my washing and cook my meals and deal with all the life admin, I could cope with more of that than I can now, because now I'm spending more spoons and there's more forks in me because I have to do all of that stuff. So it's not that my kind of sensory processing has changed. It's just that I have to spend those resources on something else.
Right. And so there's a thing that if you have less resources, your sensory system can be affected more, because it's like you've got a bit less of a wall.
Yeah, less of ability to kind of push it back.
Right. And so for me, it does change over time. It can change over the day. And as you say, it depends on what's kind of on the work plate, as you would say. That actually seems to be quite consistent. Just note out for a second with the academic research on sensory processing within autism. I think that might only be all the time that we have for questions.
Yeah, it's 1:30.
Yeah, it's 1:30. Apologies. Well, thanks so much for joining, everyone. Sorry, not apologies. It's really great having you. I'm really hard to cut this down into 30 minutes. But yeah, thanks so much. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, guys.